Oh boy, has it been a while since I've made one of these videos for the 100 book challenge. You know that. I read 100 books that I own already before I can buy any new books. It's just been busy. I don't know. I book up toward the end of the year, and then the spring or the sort of first quarter of the year is always pretty busy. So I'm going into definitely a very busy period all the way through April, which is good. Of course, the videos are not what I do for a living. I'm just doing these for fun, and I have not been having fun because these take kind of a long time. Anyway, excuses aside, what I'm going to do today will amount to episodes number 32 through 38 of the 100 book challenge. You're going to bear with me a little bit on this. I'll try to be brief with this stack of books because though I have not been making videos, of course, indeed, oh, it's too heavy. I can't even lift it. He's not, I'm going to use my shoulder for support and be very careful with that book on the bottom. Anyway, these are the books that we will be talking about today on episode number 32 through 38 of the 100 Book Challenge. All right, then we're just diving right in. This book I finished on November 12th of this year of 2025, which may not even be this year anymore. When you watch this, the first of those, number 32, is Schadenfreude, The Joy of Another's Misfortune by Tiffany Watt Smith. Fun little hardcover. The banana peel, of course, makes sense. UK author, and with a very kind of UK sense of humor and sensibility, which is fun. And I thought, when I saw this, like, that's kind of an interesting subject for a fun little book, right? And am I just looking for fun little books to get through the 100 book challenge as fast as possible? Judging me? I can feel you judging me. You don't judge me. You can't judge me. Anyway, I promised that these things would be about writing and not just book reviews, right? So one of the things that I kind of don't stress enough, I think, on, the blog or everywhere else is, as authors, are we students of, and I believe obviously that we should be, psychology? We should really have a probably better than the average person understanding of human psychology. We are creating humans. We are characters. We are creating their behaviors, showing their behaviors, their ideas, their reactions, their feelings to things, and so on. Do we have a deep understanding of how people think? As deep as possible, obviously, right? So I'm not saying, hey, unless you have a PhD in psychology or an MD specializing in psychiatry, you can't write novels. And clearly, that's not the case, right? But satisfy your curiosity, because it's all about what is our number one tool as an author, intellectual curiosity, by reading books like this, right? Why do people do this? Why do people take joy in another's misfortune? What does that mean? What does that tell us about people? And does this happen in the book you're writing? Yeah, are people laughing at the paladin, which hopefully you're not using anyway, the paladin that slips on a banana peel, right? I don't know. But these are the things the kind of books and the kind of thought experiments, I guess, right? The individual learning that we're doing just by reading anything that goes into how do people work. And, so Schadenfreude, leave it to the Germans to have a word that means the joy of another's misfortune. Where would we be without that culture? Basically, this is what makes the fail video work, right? Literally, guy slips on a banana peel. Haha, that was hilarious. this may be sort of the oldest form of a sense of humor, right? One caveman trips on the mammoth hunt and pokes himself with his pointy stick that he just made, and everybody's like, Grog, you suck. And then they go, they help him up, and everybody's a tribe again. So this is the recognition, that we are all human. And mostly, I think this takes the form of, or we seem to relish it more, and Tiffany Watt-Smith definitely addresses this, in terms of people who seem higher up on the ladder than us in some way or another, right? Somebody with political influence, somebody who's rich and famous, celebrities for sure. Oh my goodness, right? TMZ exists on the concept of schadenfreude, which is, is there going to be a nip slip at the Emmys or something, that kind of nonsense? That's schadenfreude. Oops, she didn't realize her dress was see-through. Oops, he's, whatever. Somebody just kind of said the wrong thing. Somebody who's, putting themselves forward as really smart, then says something patently incorrect. And everybody goes, ah, ha, 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 see, right? And this happens a lot in the political world. To be honest, you see this all the time on social media in the current state of the United States political system. There is a point where that stops being funny, but this is, again, things that, a book that's older than and not addressing the current political universe directly, but that also addresses, right? At what point does it become, haha, this person is incompetent, and then it's not funny that that incompetent person is in the job that they have, right? So it's not really the joy of someone being corrupt or someone being intentionally incompetent, etc., which is happening a lot these days. This is, I'm just another human like you, and I fell down. And yes, I may be whatever, whoever you are, the most famous people in the world. I might be Taylor Swift, but Taylor Swift is still a human being, right? Everybody poops, everybody falls down, everybody goofs up. And so generally speaking, when we see people in some sort of a position of power, I'm old enough to remember Gerald Ford tripping on the stairs going up to Air Force One. Let's see if I can find the photo of George Bush with the telephone upside down. It's that kind of stuff, right? Ha ha, that was a goof because this guy's a goof. Because we're all goofs. And I think part of the social compact, and again, discussed in the book, is that it isn't, or there shouldn't be, a level of cruelty to it. First of all, we're laughing at people's misfortune, not their disasters. Not, so if it's, the network MTV, which has just been disbanded, I understand, was being propped up for years by one show called Ridiculousness that was all this. It was all fail videos. It was all, skateboard kid wipes out in some sort of epic way. Some, kids on bicycles attempt some kind of stunt and boom, whatever, they fall down. But it seemed to be very carefully curated that these people were not actually hurt, right? This is not, let's see a guy fall to his death. That was not it. And that's not what schadenfreude is, right? That's a whole separate thing, where if you're thinking, gee, like snuff videos are great. No, right, that's where you need to start working on yourself. But if, whatever, some kid falls down on the bike and then gets up and is like, oh man, I was trying to go over that jump and I missed it, whatever. It's all funny, why? Because I do that. We've all done that. When I was a kid, I fell down on my bike constantly. And, tried little goofy stunts and failed, and it was more funny then than it would have been if I had made it. And, we sort of, to see somebody in a very low or no stakes situation not get there is kind of funny, because it's like, hey, I've done that. We're all in this together. Yeah. And so the book is generally pretty light, but at the same time, it digs in, right? And this is interesting. It's not just a little kind of fun, silly book. She really gets into this subject and gets to the point where is that line, right? If I trip somewhere in public and a couple of people laugh at me and point like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, yay, some inappropriate joke that I'm not going to say on the video, self-deprecating thing, and everybody has a little laugh, and I'm fine, and everything's fine, and everybody's fine, and everybody's reminded that, hey, man, every once in a while we just trip on an air molecule. It happens, yeah? However, let's look at this from the text later in the book where it starts to dig into what's behind this and are we okay and where are the lines? What might work well when it punches up to the privilege is less appealing when it is striking out in every direction, left, right, and down to the less fortunate. The more habitual schadenfreude seems, the more nervous we become about its capacity to silence, to eliminate dissent, and to inhibit constructive debate, and also to reinforce those polarized camps in which moral indignation simply ricochets, with occasional insults lobbed across the divide. We may reasonably fear that living in an age of schadenfreude puts people off public life and cheapens the discourse. We may also quite reasonably fear that schadenfreude will lose its frisson of rebellion and giddy defiance that once gave it its luster, and that indulging our taste for other people's gaffes will become merely cruel and excessive, an unpleasant end in itself. Yet isn't it precisely this risk that schadenfreude can and does go too far, that it becomes compromised or feels confusing or unhelpful, that keeps us interested in it? We may fear we are blithely indulging our taste for other people's disaster. Yet it is easy to forget that moral confusion is part of how we experience schadenfreude too. That nagging worry that we won't know when we've reached the line and will just keep going. Schadenfreude, The Joy of Another's Misfortune by Tiffany Watt Smith. This was number, 32 in the 100 book challenge. Definitely worth a read. Go find this book and think about this in terms of character creation, character reactions to things. At what point does somebody in the big epic battle at the end of the big epic fantasy novel do something goofy and all the other soldiers laugh and they have a moment where the tension sort of falls away and we're like, okay, right? Whew. Now let's go get the bad guy. Schadenfreude. So listen, even as a very young kid, I learned that when Captain America throws his mighty shield, all those who oppose his shield must yield. The Little Book of Captain America, oh my goodness, by who else but Roy Thomas? So this is the second comic book by Roy Thomas that has made this list. You remember Batman the Warriors. This one I found, this is one of those, where do you find this? In a used bookstore. I believe it was in the, sort of, what do they call it, kind of closeout or whatever section of a half-price books, and it was like $2 or something. I was like, I need that. That's awesome, right? And what's to not like about it? By Taschen, who, oh my goodness, the love of Taschen. This is one of two books from Taschen that we'll be looking at today. What to say about this? Not much, right? It's a very small format book, challenges the reading glasses to their maximum potential. And this is just Roy Thomas's very short overview of the character Captain America, from his beginnings in World War II to his reappearance in Marvel Comics in Avengers number 4 and his continued existence in the Marvel canon. I think it ends, does it end before the MCU movie? I think it does. So what did we learn about Captain America from this book? What I learned, it was, there was sort of, this sort of strange story behind how Captain America wasn't just created. And he was, okay, so in the book of Batman the Warriors, we talked a little bit about how Batman seemed to be struggling to commit to the war effort, especially before the war started for the United States, before Pearl Harbor. And then was still a little reluctant to really engage, politically, being still comic books in this era, still being for younger kids or aimed at younger kids. And then it was Batman is still in Gotham City, and he's fighting against, saboteurs and secret agents, right, Nazi agents and stuff in Gotham City. But on the other side, though, Captain America just went full bore in immediately, right? Captain America #1 is Captain America punching Hitler in the face. It's like, it's on. Jack Kirby, one of the creators, right, just immediately addressed this. We need a superhero that is going to go over there and just take it to him. And so Captain America was born. What was really interesting, though, as he follows the rest of the history of Captain America, is he gets to the end of the war. So now the war is over and we have won. What is Captain America left to do, right? All enemies have been defeated. There was kind of, I think in this era, it was sort of, do we go fully anti-communist now? Do we just switch to we hate the Russians and we're going to fight them? Which obviously definitely did happen in the Captain America world. But there was just this sort of post-war slump. And especially for a character like Captain America, who is going over to Germany to punch Hitler, and now he doesn't have a mission anymore. And what I did not know was that they started to find that they were selling more horror comics. And so they thought, what if we made Captain America kind of a horror guy who fights horror type villains? Yeah. So they changed Captain America to Weird Tales featuring Captain America, or Captain America's Weird Tales. And just over the course of a few issues, they just experimented with that so that it was just like, how do we do scary monsters and Captain America? But then how does that fit together? It didn't. And finally, they just took Captain America off of Weird Tales, and it was just over. And it was over for a fairly long period of time there, and until, Stan Lee is like, hey, we still own Captain America. You're Jack Kirby, sitting next to me in the office. We were a part creator of that. Let's bring him back to life, right? He's frozen. Let's just say he was frozen after World War II, and at that point it was less than 10 years, that he then, or just about 10 years, that he came back into the Avengers. And they thought, let's make him part of the Avengers and we will figure it out. Again, there's the cover. So you'll see in the book there's just sort of these are not full stories like Batman had the full stories. These are just some, kind of pages, splash pages and so on. And obviously covers that Roy Thomas picked out to sort of show the development and the history of the character. Is this a weird... Hello, everyone. This is me reading the Captain America book. So how much more is there to say, right? Captain America became part of the Avengers, and he became part of the Marvel Universe. Got his own comic book, of course, and became a really popular character, yeah? Through into, the 60s, into the 70s, 80s, etc. And still, right? I have a copy of this one in its original form. And then, of course, for my money, and I don't think this is a hot take. I don't do hot takes. I do takes. And then everybody's like, you know what, Phil, you're right. Captain America, the First Avenger, was the best of the MCU movies, period. It was the best overall movie from beginning to end, especially when it ends with that really enormously sad moment that I'm not sure everybody who saw that actually remembers. Watch that movie again if you can, if you pay for Disney Plus or wherever it is, and keep going through the end where he wakes up. I mean, spoiler alert, and it's the present day, and then his Captain America's last line in the movie is heartbreaking. And right away, that just sort of re-energized my interest in Captain America as a character as a kid. He was kind of like, oh, he's cool, I guess, right? But I was so Fantastic Four focused, and then became Conan, and then whatever. But he was there, and he was cool, and I was like, yeah, I mean, Captain America belongs there. So this was just, why not read this for fun? I have it. It's one of the 100 books. Yes, it's short. Yes, it's small. Yes, it's difficult to read because these captions are just itsy bitsy teeny weeny tiny type. But who cares? I don't care. There's a whole series of these. I don't remember which other characters they made these for, but I'll do the right thing and I'll put pictures of them over here if I can find them. I'm going to collect the rest of these just because it's such a nice little great artifact to have. The little book of Captain America was number 33. That gets us to a third of the way through the 100 book challenge. Thank you, Captain America. And so then here we are at number 34 in the 100 book challenges, Anarchaos by Kurt Clark. So this came from the giant stacks of mass market paperbacks, old and not very new, right? I think maybe the latest one is, I think The Girl with All the Gifts is in there. That's, I think, the latest one. Whatever. This is from 1967, published by Ace in these great small format mass market books, very much like the Ace doubles, in the same format as the Ace doubles that I collect. This is not a double. And bought it at a used bookstore somewhere at some point because it just looked cool. And I love these little old Ace books. And there it sat in the giant stacks until, luck would have it, I pull it out. And I loved this book. This is a full-throated recommendation of Anarchaos by Kurt Clark. This is, now remember, we're going to talk about these books in terms of writing and genre writing, etc. The pacing of this book is absolutely relentless. Okay, only up to like the very end where he does kind of eject from it, which was a little disappointing, but it's not disappointing enough to miss this. You need to read this book. I was just like, what is even happening here? The twists and turns that are insane. It is a masterclass in beating the crap out of your protagonist. Setup is actually pretty simple. Our hero has been in jail. He gets released, and before that, his brother had come to this planet called Anarchaos, which is this libertarian dystopia, right? We are finally going to settle this planet, and our colony will have no government, and it'll just be about the rugged individual and every man for himself, and we'll be free of the restraints of the collective. And of course, it's just a god-awful nightmare. They literally practice slavery. It's just murder and fighting in the streets. Everybody is just poor and scrambling and trying to steal from each other. But the government isn't going to do anything to regulate us. Secretly, sort of behind the scenes, of course, the whole thing is run by a series of giant corporations that are loving the fact that they can use slave labor because there's no laws here, because regulation is bad for business. 1967, and here's an author I've never heard of who has something to say, y'all, about where we are and where certain people, the Republican Party, are trying to push us into dystopia. Right? So these weird little books that I find at random, probably because the cover was cool. I'm a sucker for a sci-fi cityscape, period. And I love these old Ace not doubles, right? But these Ace small format mass markets. So I just started to read it at random and was like, this book is fantastic. This Kurt Clark guy knows what he's doing. So after finishing it, I'm like, you know what? Well, first of all, right, let's find out how many other books Kurt Clark wrote and try to find all those and read all of Kurt Clark. At this point, lo and behold, Kurt Clark is not a real person. I think this is the only time this name was used. This book was actually written by Donald A. Westlake. Okay? So as soon as I learned that, I was like, oh, okay, right? So guy who writes, like cop thrillers and stuff like that, has that boom, 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 boom storytelling ability, and it shines here. I was like, okay, I wasn't writing the unknown author Kurt Clark. I was reading Donald A. Westlake. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, right? So that, of course, then makes me want to just start reading tons of Donald A. Westlake, especially any of the science fiction that he's written over the years. So beyond the unfortunately relevant political overtones to this, in terms of, remember, we're going to talk about this in terms of writing. So this is a book that really you want to read in terms of a masterclass in pacing, and definitely in just beating the ever-loving crap out of your protagonist. It's, every writing teacher or whatever will tell you that it's really about throwing obstacles in the way, making your characters earn what they get, not just, right? I think read this and then read the Da Vinci Code and see how much better this is, right? How much more entertaining a read it is when the character just keeps getting, nope, no, right? 2 steps forward, 20 steps back, 1 step forward. I mean, just beats this guy to a pulp in this, right? And, forget about all the kind of, how I feel about Save the Cat and the hero's journey, which is just as bad, thoroughly debunked old idea. It is more about kind of going back to Aristotle and the 3-act structure. It's about the villain starts the story. Somebody does something terrible, and the terrible thing is that his brother, right, the protagonist's brother, is killed just as our hero is getting out of prison to come to Anarchaos because his brother has promised him a job. And so he still goes because now he wants to know what happened to my brother, what happened here. And then, of course, is immediately comes up against this idea that there's no one to call, right? You can't go really to the police and say, hey, I want to see the police report on this, because there is no police, right? So he has to make his way through this ridiculously impossible to navigate world in order to find out who killed his brother, right? Trying to get revenge, or at least an explanation, what happened. And throughout, right, I was taking notes of positive examples, right? So another thing something I've talked about, there's a blog post I'll link to down in the description, and I've talked about in courses on writing and so on, is be careful of what I love to call used car salesman dialogue. And this is when, and if you've been to that kind of old school sales training, they will encourage you to do this. Use the first name of the person you're talking to as much as possible in order to create this friend connection really, really fast. And I call it used car salesman because that's kind of that level of training, right? Like, if you just keep calling me Phil over and over and over again, I will come to see you as a friend, and so I will accept the bloated price for the car or whatever. You will close on me today because you know my first name, and I've repeated it 30 times. In normal conversation, this always comes across as weird and creepy. And I think most people in that sort of sales situation where you're like in a car showroom or something and you're like, oh, come on. Like, I get that you know my name and you heard it. Like, how much is it? Here's a great example of that where you can use this on purpose, yeah, to say, this is the kind of person who would do that, who's trying to manipulate you in some way and trying to sort of pretend to be nice, to pretend to be your friend. When I was getting out of prison and with the other paperwork, I put a request for a stellar passport. My counselor mentioned it in our last session saying, you plan to start life again on a new world, Rolf, is that it? Something like that, I said. Why is that, Rolf? He used my name a lot to establish a personal relationship between us. I never used his name at all. And from there, the counselor continues to just drop his name into every sentence and speaks for the rest of the scene, right? So this is an example of a veteran author, not the one-off Kurt Clark, but the veteran Donald A. Westlake, using that, kind of sales technique in a way that is just irritating and immediately identifiable to the protagonist, right? And boy, as an editor, so much of my time is spent talking about point of view. I'm a firm believer in the one scene, one point of view technique, not rule. I use the word rule, and I should stop using the word rule. It's not a rule. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want. It's as art. Create fiction out of anything in any way you want to. But a technique that works, especially in genre fiction or popular fiction, is that one scene, one point of view. And that means that everything that's happening is filtered not just through, I can see this thing, so I'm reporting on the room that is 30 feet by 40 feet and the ceiling is 12 feet tall, right? Not in that kind of, here's some extraneous details, but in an emotional way. We are all emotional beings. Everything we're seeing, everything we're hearing is being filtered through, do I like that? Do I hate that? Do I care? Why do I care? Should I care? What do I do? What's the next thing I say? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get deeper into this? Right? All that stuff. So how about this example of tight point of view from NRK? She studied me in silence for nearly a minute, and I read her every thought on her face. I knew when her curiosity about me was uppermost in her mind, and I knew when her dislike of being taken so bluntly for granted was strongest, and I knew when she was considering the possibility of using me to avenge her pique against the colonel, and I knew when she decided that if she had the name, she might as well have the game. I also knew when she was deciding not to answer me too quickly, in order not to appear eager or easy, and in my mind I counted to 10 with her, missing by one beat, so that I had just finished thinking 9 when she smiled with sex in it and said, "You're not very subtle, are you, Rolf?" So keep in mind, right, that she studied me in silence. He believes her to be doing that for nearly a minute. And then he says, I read her every thought on her face. So he doesn't have, this is a science fiction novel, so he might have psychic powers, but he does not. He's just looking at sort of her reaction to him and drawing out of that all of these conclusions, which may or may not be the slightest bit correct. But that's the thing, right? We are not experiencing this other character as her fully formed self. We're only experiencing her through the experience of the point of view character. So he is deciding, it's her dislike of being taken so bluntly for granted and all that stuff. He's reading that into her. She might be radiating something completely different, or that, but not really. It doesn't matter, because she really only exists, anything and everything only exists in your even in your third person narrative, from the direct experience of the character. That is who we are as readers in this story. We are this person in this world. We are getting I'm not going to do any spoilers. We're getting treated badly, right? We are meeting people and trying to figure them out, thinking that we do figure them out, because he comes into the story with enormous confidence, where he's just like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to crack some skulls and I'm going to get, answers to what happened to my brother. And then, literally within like the second or third chapter, it goes completely off the rails for him. But again, this is this point of view character's experience of this woman in this moment. It is not literally exactly what she's thinking. And that's more interesting, because we are this person. We're not both of these people. We're this one person trying to figure out where he stands with this other person. Anarchaos by Kurt, Donald A. Westlake, Clark. Find this book. It may not be super easy. I don't know. There's probably some Kindle version of it out there. I don't know. Find this book. Read it. You will not be sorry. This was random paperback. Mega pleasant surprise. Loved it. That was Anarchaos, number 34. Finished reading that 21 days ago. I promised you another book from Taschen. And there it is. This is H.R. Giger. Whew. What can I say about H.R. Giger? And the question really is, what part of this book can I possibly show on YouTube without getting... I don't know what happens. What happens when you show like boobies on YouTube? Do they arrest you? Am I going to go to alligator Alcatraz? Should we even be joking about that? Probably not. So I'm, again, of a gentleman of a certain age. So I was a big fan, and I kind of still am, a big fan. It's on my iTunes library and comes up every once in a while. Emerson, Lake and Palmer and the album Brain Salad Surgery. My older brother bought this when we were little, and I could not get enough of it. I was just like, it's the music of the future. Oh, this is it, right? It had immediately that image and just this sort of weird kind of folk future, like folk sci-fi sensibility, I think, or so, like a whatever, like 9-year-old Phil thought, however old I was. And so, I don't know, I never really connected at that time album covers with the person who created the album cover. But then Alien, not too many years later, right away, the scariest movie ever made. I still believe it is the scariest movie ever made. Just one of those perfect gems of a movie. And one of the things that made it that way was that they hired H.R. Giger. And if you don't know the whole story of how that came about, there is a movie you have to find if you haven't seen it already. Like, you have to see Jodorowsky's Dune. This is the story of Alejandro Jodorowsky, who had the rights to make the Dune movie through a producer partner of his from France, and went very far down the path of making this movie. But ultimately what he realized in this giant series, just book full of storyboards, drawn by Mobius, no less, was something that there's no way he was going to be able to film in whatever that was, like 1975. But he went so far down the pre-production of this that he started hiring other artists. He actually engaged Pink Floyd and another like sort of weird like dark metal band to do the music. He hired Chris Foss to do spaceship design. And of course, H.R. Giger, he came across, and I think it was Salvador Dali who said to Jodorowsky, this is a guy you should look at for all the Harkonnen stuff, because he wanted the Harkonnen world to look very much like the Harkonnen world. And so he contacted Giger, who is a Swiss artist, and saw some of his work and was like, yes, absolutely. So with this book here, right, it has this weird sort of protects the other side of the spine. I thought that was going to be a real problem, but actually it sort of compresses inside. And so you can actually read this book. So anyway, this is Taschen, known for really some of the best art books ever. And they also did the Captain America book. They do all sorts of great stuff, but always with a intense visual design to them. And just a quality of printing, like it's like the book is properly sewn and stuff like that. And so I thought I was kind of a Giger fan. Like I've seen a lot of his work. Was, like I said, really impressed by Alien. And at that time was just like, I need to know everything about movies and how movies are made, and found him, obviously as the guy who created the Alien itself. And connected back to the Emerson, Lake and Palmer album. And so for years, I'm like, I love Giger. Giger is awesome. And, on the internet, you see sort of a scattering of his work. I remembered the poster in the Dead Kennedys album that caused a big hullabaloo because it was obscene and all that stuff, and they tried to ban that. Reading this book, first of all, the book is really just sort of the story of his career. And how he sort of progressed, and he, suddenly discovered the airbrush, which is where the sort of Giger look there really came from. And then but mostly really what you're coming for here is the art. And you see if I can, here's things that won't get censored. This is interesting too, right? Because it goes into a little bit about the inspiration behind this. He saw a garbage truck somewhere in Europe, and he thought something about this mechanism just stuck in his mind. He couldn't let it go. There was just something about the shape of that he did this whole series of paintings on. So he would do things like that. He would just get fascinated with this shape, this machine. And obviously Giger's whole career is the idea of biomechanics. So it's the human form that then is twisted into and twisted by machines. Let's risk showing this one, right? So it's usually female figures that are sort of installed into some sort of industrial-looking mechanism. In some cases, even babies put into things, like babies that look like bullets loaded into a gun, in series of paintings called The Birth Machine. And just, all sorts of morphing of the human form. Everything is intensely dark. Most of his paintings are effectively black and white. But as the book continues, as I think, sort of as he ages into some of the feelings of this imagery, it gets darker and darker and darker. And by darker, I don't mean literally in form, right? Here he is with the alien costume. Okay, so any art book does this. I think we talked about this with The Fantastic Planet. It is artwork that disappears into the gutter, and this book unfortunately has some egregious examples of that. And when I kind of flip through the Goodreads reviews, a lot of people, sort of got hung up on that the same way I did. That's just, I'm sure that the people at Taschen, who are always trying to do their best and do the best work, present their artists as best they can, probably just feel like it's a necessary evil. But it was a drag in some cases. Most of the time the art is on a single page. Can I show this? Do we risk it? Right. He did some paintings that felt like he was kind of dabbling into the occult, but that felt like less of a, something that was less important to him. It also shows some of the really intense sculptures. I don't know. What else can I say, right? I think Giger is one of those artists where it's like you either get it or you don't. So here it is, December, what, 5 days after the solstice. And here in the Seattle area, on the 21st of December, we had 8 hours and 25 minutes of daylight. This is the thing about living in the Pacific Northwest. I love the Pacific Northwest. It is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I'm not even exaggerating that. And Seattle, great city. I mean, just spectacular. Love everything about it. So happy to have been, almost forcibly moved here when TSR was bought up by Wizards of the Coast and my job went this way. And I was like, yeah, how fast can I get there? However, winters sometimes creep up on me, and this winter really crept up on me. When you look outside and you're like, oh, what, like, oh my God, it's like, it's got to be like 8, 9 o'clock at night, right? And it's like 3:45. You start thinking, why am I here? Like, how far south do I have to go to see any amount of sunshine, especially since it's also the rainy season. So right now I'm looking outside and it's windy and it's incredibly gray and it just rains constantly. So Seattle winters can take its toll on people, and they can take their toll on me. And as I'm reading this and I'm spending time with it and I'm really looking at these paintings and just kind of putting myself into that world of black and metallic gray, while living in a world of black and metallic gray, I think this was a mistake to read in December in the Seattle area. You have to be, if you live here or if you're planning to move here, you have to really think about, like, where are you depression-wise? Are you ready for this? Are you going to be okay? A book like this, and here's why. Because I thought I knew Giger, like I said. I knew the album cover, obviously. Alien was just like greatest thing in the world. Saw others of his work kind of on the internet and here and there. He gets way darker than what normally comes up on a Giger art search, right? Why, for some reason, I thought, well, I have a handle on him. I've seen like the weirdest stuff he's done. Not by half. He gets into some crazy territory where this collision of the human form and the machine starts to just get feeling more and more kind of violent and super disturbing. And when you go like a week and it seems like it goes from dusk to night to dusk to night to dusk to night, this started working on my brain, and not necessarily in a positive way, although I will always respect this art, the art of H.R. Giger. I would love it. Maybe I should just revisit this book in July, because this was really, I mean, this got to me, and you have to go a long way to kind of get to me like that, where I just thought, should I even be reading this? Like, is it okay? So here is me. This is the 40th anniversary Taschen edition here. If you have the slightest bit of interest in H.R. Giger, like if you haven't already been turned off by the subject matter and the style and so on, please get this book. Please come to a great, more detailed understanding of this spectacularly unique artist who just had this singular vision that came out of some dark place, and you can turn a page and things will hit you in this. So with warnings, with trigger warnings, with caveats, and maybe not in an otherwise depressive period, but this book is spectacular. H.R. Giger is spectacular. And what makes him spectacular is that he can do that to my brain. Okay, so H.R. Giger in a Seattle winter, maybe not a great idea, but when I understood maybe, am I doing the right thing by reading this, I was already also reading Crash by J.G. Ballard. Holy crap. December was hard. December was hard on me. And I made it hard on myself by just living in H.R. Giger's insane biomechanical hellscape while reading the biomechanical hellscape of Crash by J.G. Ballard. This is number 36, finished on December 14th of 2025. So I've read Giger. I've read Ballard before, not everything, and I have in every intention of reading everything by this author who is spectacular most of the time. I found this book somewhere, used book sale or whatever, and didn't realize until I started reading it that it's the movie tie-in edition, which normally I'm like, not the movie tie-in edition. Come on, man. Because it almost seems like James Spader is at least as important as the author. But whatever. Inside is the actual text of the book. And this is one of those where I've talked about these. I don't know if these were in videos, but recently I've read a couple of books, namely The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker, which was adapted as the movie Hellraiser, and Altered States by Paddy Chayefsky, which became obviously the movie of the same name. And I thought that was kind of an interesting experience, right? To read a book based on a movie, or not the book, or whatever. A book that a movie that I've seen before and really liked, or liked at least a little. So then going back to the book in the sort of the reverse order that I think most people would recommend, right? Read the book. The book is always better. And then see the movie and be angry with it, right? So I saw the David Cronenberg movie of Crash really when it first came out and was like, I don't know, right? Clearly this is a story of a fetish, right? That goes horribly out of control. And, that sort of coalesces into a series of, or kind of cluster of mental illnesses in this small, tight, very codependent group of people who have been involved in terrible car accidents. And somehow that trauma manifests in a sort of sexual fetish. So around cars, around injury, around the violence of a car accident, I think Cronenberg handled it in a way that was really interesting. And, I thought, but it also sort of felt like I didn't quite get there because I'm having trouble understanding that jump, right? Which is hard when you're talking about something that's a very specific kind of, sort of trauma response. I was in a car accident. It was pretty bad. I would have like weird panic attacks for maybe a year after that. But that was like really a long time ago. And it never really stayed with me, although maybe I became a safer driver and was sure to wear seatbelts and stuff like that. But I didn't go into this. But then, of course, if everybody does it, it's not really a novel. This is Ballard really going into the next level of what if, yeah. So, I don't like to be critical. I'm not a critic. These are not reviews. I mean, they are, I guess, I don't know, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and say, and boy, there are going to be J.G. Ballard fans who come at me. Go ahead, come at me, because I have nothing but respect for this author. He didn't get there with this one. First of all, this was a great short story that was then padded. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. It really felt like a metaphor for the violence of a car accident equals the inherent violence of sex, and then another metaphor of that, and then another metaphor of that, and then another metaphor of that, and then another scene where, and then a scene where we're kind of like, ooh, I don't know, are we kind of like going to get together over, because there was this, we like car crashes and the injuries that result, and then no, but yes, but no, but yes, and that's over and over and over again. It felt enormously repetitious and padded. And I don't know if that was something that he was doing purposefully, like to create some sort of, and maybe, right, we're stuck in this mental loop of, we need this, we hate this, we're afraid of this, we love this, we want it, right? But again, had I read this in June or July when there was any hint of there being such a thing as daytime, would I have had a different feeling, a different experience? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Am I prepared to say, and you're going to kill me, that the movie was better, even though the movie was imperfect? I think, this is for me, right? It's all about just opinion. Your mileage will always vary. These are subjective opinions. This is not me saying, as the authority of what right? You have your own reactions to stuff. I have this is my reaction. I think I've only seen 2 movies based on novels that I have read that I thought were better than the novel, or in one case, the novella. Both of those happen to have been written by Stephen King. One I know Stephen King would disagree with, and another that I think he would agree with, and I've heard him say that the ending of The Mist in the movie was better than in the book. Otherwise, or the novella, otherwise it follows the novella almost exactly. The other is The Shining. The book was good. The book was good. Kubrick took this to like 5,000 levels beyond. And I'm sorry, man, but I love Stephen King. I'm a Stephen King fan. This is not like, ooh, Stephen King sucks because he's popular or any of that stuff. Stanley Kubrick. Yeah. I think David Cronenberg inched it out over JG here, and I am embarrassed to say it. Although Cronenberg is Cronenberg, right? I mean, he kind of, I think what Cronenberg found was the essence of the short story, that this really is or really should have been, and made a novel based on that, made a movie based on that, and left and then again, and then again, and then again, and then more and more and more of the same thing over and over and over again. Is that supposed to signify the traffic keeps going, cars keeps going, life keeps going, and we're stuck in this loop of car crash, sex, car crash, sex, car crash? I don't know. But, and then again, right, just like I said with the H.R. Giger book, should I be reading this in December when there's only 8 hours of daylight, which is mostly not daylight? It's mostly just a sort of gray dusk. Am I in the headspace for this? I don't think I was in the headspace for this, and I continue to just not get it. And I don't think that the assumption was, oh, you're gonna read this and then you're gonna be turned on by car crashes. But there was just something about it that felt entirely alien, and then just grinding me through it. I think J.G. Ballard wrote a spectacular short story in here somewhere and then buried it under an attempt at a novel. So what do we learn from Crash, or what did I learn from Crash? This really just cemented something that I have known all along, which is no book is made better by being made longer. Crash by J.G. Ballard. I don't know. My computer has gone to sleep, and I keep trying to wake it up, and for some reason I'm not doing it. This is why I'm looking down, and maybe you hear tapping. I don't know. What do we put ourselves through, right? Crash by J.G. Ballard. So far, my least favorite novel by J.G. Ballard. And though I did not love it, it still had moments of greatness. It had moments of Ballardianness. Crash was number 36. We're almost there. There's only 2 more books to go to get caught up on the 100-book challenge. Dear God, I really want to buy one of those UV lamps. Intentionally lightening the mood, picked this off of the stack of short books. I'm like, just give me something short that maybe is not about people being mangled and combined with machines and then like thinking that that's really like hot. Oh man. I mean, if you really want to just go there, really just switch off between that H.R. Giger book and Crash. And don't say I didn't warn you. 84 Charing Cross Road. Why did I think this was a novel? This was in the my stacks of little fiction books or little kind of literary fiction mini novels. And it's not. It is a memoir. This is all a true story. It is an epistolary book, which means it is a collection of letters. These were real letters that the author, Helene Hanff, who was living in New York City, and was a writer on the Ellery Queen TV series, and had apparently a hard time finding exactly the antiquarian English books, English meaning from England, not, obviously also written in English, that she couldn't find or had trouble finding in New York at the time. Starting in the years immediately following the war, or it's the first letter. You can hear the pages turning because this is real, man. There's no AI in here. This is a book written by a human. The first letter is dated October 5th of 1949, where she's responding to an ad that she saw in the Saturday Review of Literature, and she's like, she can't find the rare editions she wants. She can't really find it at Barnes & Noble, which is nice to hear that people were going to Barnes & Noble and I guess not finding the right stuff as far back as 1949. So she wrote to this bookseller called Marks & Company at 84 Charing Cross Road in London. And what started then in October of 1949 became really this 20-year correspondence between Helene in New York and the staff of this little antiquarian bookstore in London. The cover is a photo of the actual store there from the time period. Looks like a great place to just get lost in there for a minute, and after the 100-book challenge, getting on a plane. Hopefully they're still there. I don't think they are. And it's just, she's looking for very specific books, and she has this like very kind of New Yorky sense of humor where she's like kind of gets fake angry at them when they don't have what she wants or it's taking too long, or hey, why didn't you, you're not telling me. And it's also kind of funny the amounts of money that are being sent back and forth. She's like, I don't know how to convert your weird, because this, again, pre-decimalization in England. I have no idea how to convert your weird money into dollars. Just say how many dollars I owe you and I'll send it. And she literally puts paper money in an envelope and sends it off to England. And with a list of books that she wants, in many cases, very specific books. Not this translator, that translator, not this edition, not, you're right, in the Vulgate Latin and not, right? And with these specific instructions, they go off and try to find these books if they don't have them in stock. And it may take months, but then they just, we got one, put it in a box, send it to New York, which gets there strangely fast for this period of time. Although remember, there's the rebuilding of Europe during the war, and you can only imagine stuff going back and forth between New York and England, just boom, 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 boom. And it gets into sort of, on her side, on Helene's side, the sort of life of this writer in New York in the what really starts at the very end of the 40s and really is mostly through the 50s. And she got this job on TV that's paying the bills. She's kind of trying to sell this article, so seeing her struggle, she's living in an apartment where they turn the heat off at night and stuff, and then, finally makes enough money by writing TV series like $200 an episode. Like, where is the Writers Guild on that, huh? Finally moves into a nicer apartment and so on, with more space for books, so she's going to buy more books, and is easily sending them stuff. So she's like, here's $5, just kind of put that on account so that she has a running account with them, finding these books, sending them to her. Yes, this is great. Oh, I'm so happy to get that. And then, of course, it's 1949, 50, 51. Rationing is still happening in England after the war. And she starts, there's apparently this service, like in Denmark, or is sort of serviced out of Denmark, where Americans can say, send a care package, right, with, different kinds of, food, really mostly food, to this address in England, which I imagine would be the rest of Western Europe, still rebuilding and coming out of this worst thing that's ever happened in human history. And so it gets to be she has this pen pal relationship with the entire staff of the store, especially this one guy named Frank, who is married. It's not a romantic thing, so this isn't a, like long lost lovers, catfish or whatever kind of thing. It's all just about, I love books, and then I got to know these people just through letters, and we've become friends. We've become correspondents. And it's a tiny little book. I read it in 2 sittings over 2 days. It's, there are pages where there's that much text. So this is really definitely something that if you have an afternoon and it's dark and it's winter and you just need to touch base with people who love books and just talk about how great books are, and then start doing nice things for each other, and just you get a minute, like you spend like whatever, this is like 98 pages or something like that. I don't even know, right? 94 actual text pages. Tiny little thing. Give yourself an afternoon to just come down from the H.R. Giger meets Crash experience. Oh, boy. This book is, I think, more now of a great favorite of mine because of that, right? Because this is sort of my recovery book from that unbelievably dark and oppressive experience during an unbelievably dark and oppressive time. Just love this. If you're just a book person, if you're a book collector, man, I don't know who else, anyone else, Anglophiles get it. 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. This is number 37 in the 100 book challenge, and saved my brain. Thank you. Okay, then what? This is the last one. Number 38 in the 100 book challenge. Am I shifty-eyed? This is my dance move. I have all the moves. Just watch out. We all have an inner Beyonce. Just don't with me. This is the last one, number 38. If you've been watching my book haul videos, I don't know if you saw the video where I found at a Half Price Books here in the Seattle area. I didn't bring it over here. I'm not going to bring it over here. Should I bring it over here? I'm going to bring it over here. We'll cut around this. He's back with the box set. Found this at a local Half Price Books. And it was just like, right? One of those like, huge. You got to call it what it is. It was a nerdgasm moment. Just bear with me. We've talked about Crash and H.R. Giger already. You can handle that. This is Origins of Marvel Comics and Son of Origins of Marvel Comics. Now, when I was a young tot, I I got Son of Origins of Marvel Comics, and it was just one of the greatest experiences of my life to have that book. I used to just read it over and over again and just read different of the comics, right? So the idea, this is written by Stan Lee, and this company Fireside would do these illustrated books, and it was just different Marvel superheroes and their origin stories. So it would be, this is Son of Origins, right? When the Golden Avenger was gray. So this is the first appearance. He writes a little introduction in that very Stan Lee voice, right? And then you get the full, in color, first appearance of, in this case, Iron Man. Yikes, right? But super awesome. And then a later issue so he can show you sort of how that character evolves. I love this. And I knew, obviously, that it was the sequel, Son of Origins. And out there in the world was Origins of Marvel Comics, and I could not find it anywhere, and I never had it for, oh my God, just decades and decades and decades until I found this box set. It was $75, and I kind of paused, and my wife said, you know, as soon as you leave, if you don't buy that, you're just going to live in regret, and you're going to be impossible. And I was like, yeah, I'm buying it. So $75 later, I had both of them. And so again, help me lighten the mood. And so in my reading scheme that I do, I always have one, you know, kind of a comic book, graphic novel collection, etc., comic collection, graphic novel, or these art books like H.R. Giger. So it was some sort of visual or graphic thing. And I was like, you know what, we're not going to go back to Dark Darkness. We need to leave the Dark Darkness behind. And it's been months since I bought this, in a long time. And why have I not read this yet? Oh my God, it's The Origins of Marvel Comics by Stan the Man Lee. And it was just instantaneously pure love. Stan Lee writes in such a way that is, and I think is off-putting to the sort of modern sensibility, people who weren't kids at that time. And I think there's way too much said about, oh, he took all the credit. This entire book is about how awesome Jack Kirby is, how he came up with Spider-Man, Kirby didn't hit it, he went to Steve Ditko and said, you know, I got this character, I don't know, right? And then Ditko just took it and ran with it. So through this entire book, it really is a lot of credit where credit is due. He just lists off names of other creators, right? Talking about how, you know, who picked this up, and Jack Kirby did a great job, you know, co-creating the Hulk with me. And then the art went to Herb Trimpe, and he just nailed it, and Herb Trimpe is awesome. So all of that, like, Stan Lee takes all the credit, is just not actually true. He doesn't take all the credit. He takes a lot of the credit. He deserves a lot of the credit. But then also, his function there was not just, well, at first, like, writing all of these, right? Like, just one after another, just writing and writing and writing these. Creating, concepting these characters, and all the weird villains and everything that goes with it. But his job very much became to be that showman, to be the huckster, to be the hype man of Marvel Comics. And I think that was a big reason why Marvel Comics took over from DC and became what it is, because there was a spokesperson, there was a focused person who would talk to you. He would have little things like, oh, you remember in last ish, Stan. And he would make up funny little nicknames for everybody. And he even says in this book, I didn't go around calling Jack Kirby the King, you know. It was just, you know, basically to hype this thing up. Like, this is Jack the King Kirby. And hey, man, at the time, he was the king of comic book artists, period. And, you know, he would call himself Stan the Man Lee, which is, his name was Stanley, I think Stanley Leibowitz, he shortened that. Like a lot of people did. Like my grandfather, Constantine Athanasiadis, just thought it might be a little much for the locals up in Watertown, New York, and so Athens was born. But, you know, it happens, or it did. It used to happen anyway. So anyway, in this book we get, in parts, right, if one is good, four will be better. So again, this is the first one. And it starts with the world's greatest comic magazine, the Fantastic Four. And he starts with just a few pages of introduction, this is great because this is basically when the Marvel Age of Comics was born. They were doing mostly monster, like horror things, but a lot of giant monster stories and stuff. And, meanwhile, DC is kind of, just dominating the superhero marketplace. They've got, Superman is going, Batman is going, etc. And they had the Justice League, and I guess Stan Lee's boss said, we need to have a superhero team, make a superhero team. And Stan Lee famously was about to quit. He was going to go and write the great American novel, but his wife said, listen, if the whole thing is falling apart anyway, right? Whatever, I can't remember the name of it. Was it Timely Comics? If it's all just seems like it's going to hell and it's played out and over, why don't you just do whatever you want? Just make something that you would do. And he did, along with Jack Kirby, and created the Fantastic Four that was instantaneously a hit. And everybody was like, oh, well, we're like, really? But what was really cool here is you can see in this first issue, right? This is really the first Marvel comics, right? Part of the Marvel universe. We're set in Central City. So, obviously DC Comics is famous for Superman lives in Metropolis, which is New York by any other name. Batman lives in Gotham City, which is New York by a name that a lot of people actually use for New York City. But they kind of, and I think there's a Central City in DC, right? That's supposed to be kind of Chicago. But here Stan Lee is kind of like, well, we have to make up a city for some reason, right? And so we're in Central City, but whatever. But this is where, these four intrepid friends go up in Reed Richards' untested rocket ship and are exposed to cosmic rays, which of course then they crash back on Earth and they all have superpowers. And they are the greatest superheroes of all time. And they become the Fantastic Four because there are four of them and they're fantastic. But so again, we're seeing in color, nicely reproduced. It's not glossy paper, which I think, honestly, the glossy color omnibuses and collections of the really old comics from this era feel weird. They're too bright. They're too on the nose. I think because they were originally printed on newsprint and that's like very cheap printing, process, that when Fireside took the dots away and stuff and really made it clearer and the colors more solid, but still printed it on this kind of matte finish paper, I think it's better. It's just hot take day. We're hot taking. It's better. I think, especially comics from this era, and we're talking about the early 60s here with the Fantastic Four, just look better printed on paper and not on the glossy kind of 4/4 stuff. Well, so then he presents us goes from the first issue to the 55th issue because we got to get the Silver Surfer in there. You got to get the Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer was the best. Still to this day, and I don't care what anybody says, because do I care what anybody says? I don't care what anybody says. I'm a man alone. I'm a citizen of Anarchaos. Still the greatest single story arc in the history of comics, which was the original Silver Surfer Galactus thing, and then the Silver Surfer went out on his own into the first ever series of pure existentialist superhero comics. But here, this is just sort of another one where the Thing has this romantic misunderstanding. He thinks that the Silver Surfer is after his girlfriend, and so it's clobbering time. Is what it is. It's clobbering time, if you had to know, right? There shall come a jolly green giant. Here we get the story of why the Hulk was gray in the first issue and then became green. And that was basically because the printer couldn't do a consistent gray. And so he was like, in the first issue, he was kind of gray, and then he was really like more or less black, like just kind of blacked out. And then he was just nothing. And then he was green in one, and he was like kind of red in another. And so it was just like, okay, well, I thought he was, I want him to be gray, but they can't do gray, so let's say that he's green. Let's go with green. And so Stan Lee says that for this book, they presented the cover of the Hulk being gray, but then made him green throughout so that we're not seeing the weird color shifts and the attempt at gray. So here we have the first appearance of the Hulk. This is Dr. Bruce Banner, pelted by gamma rays, turns into the Hulk. And the character starts out, which I thought, I remember, right? I'm reading this in other places. He starts out as, when night falls, he turns into the Hulk. It was only later that the angry thing came out. I turn into Hulk when I get angry is obviously way better, and it's obviously what that character has been defined as for, these many decades later. But in this case, it's just Hulk at nighttime, Dr. Bruce Banner during the daytime, and the story was just pure bliss and happiness. All right, and then we jump to the Incredible Hulk number 118. And we're going up against the Submariner. Again, one of my favorite characters because it was another one that was sort of rebirthed from the olden days, from back in the World War II days. Submariners and the Human Torch, but this is a different Human Torch. You know that story. Were from those comics from back in the war years. So in this one, it sort of continues a story where the Hulk is sort of thrown into the ocean. He goes back to being Bruce Banner, and then he is sort of rescued by an Atlantean, and there's all sorts of misunderstandings between him and Prince Namor, and most of the whole thing is just this giant, crazy underwater fight scene, which is just boss as can be. Part 3 is the world's best-selling swinger. I wonder who that could be. This is another one that goes into this, they've got this fantasy magazine, or it's kind of monster magazine, and it's failing. It's over, right? So they're like, for the last issue, it's like, why don't I do like this? I had this idea. What if instead of having a teen sidekick, the teenager is the superhero? Oh, that's crazy, Stan. There's no way. Whatever, right? He tells that whole story. But became this superior, iconic cover of just mega Steve Ditko greatness. Amazing Fantasy number 15. Try to buy a copy of that for under thousands and thousands of dollars. Here we have Peter Parker, nerd. And I can say that because I consider myself a nerd. But he's a science nerd. I'm kind of a science nerd. And he goes to the science exhibit. Well, all of his friends are laughing like, oh yeah, we're going to go to the science exhibit with you. Like, sure. Whatever, Peter Parker. Where he is bitten by a radioactive spider, which then gives him the power of a spider. Because that, my God, the number of times I've been bitten by radioactive stuff. I don't know. Why did it have to be a jackass? Then the great story where he's like, it never occurs to him like, ooh, I'm a superhero now. He thinks, ooh, I can make money now. And he becomes he goes on the Ed Sullivan show, basically. He just shows off, tries to be a wrestler and stuff. And it's all about just I'm creating a character that I can do, but I don't want people to know it's me for some reason. And then there's that great moment where he lets this guy who robbed, I think it's the TV show, the wrestling match or the TV show, he lets him go, like, hey, kid, stop that guy. And he's like, it's not my problem. And then this guy ends up killing his Uncle Ben. Peter lives with his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Is it possible that you're watching anything like a channel called Fantasy Author's Handbook and you don't know the story of Spider-Man? Anyway, and it ends, right, with this great line. At last, that in this world with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Stan Lee, philosopher. And then we get this one, number 72, much later. Love the Shocker. Who doesn't love the Shocker? The Shocker's shocking some people. There's some sort of stone tablet that we're suffering over. Um, Big relationship problems with Gwen Stacy. Peter Parker always had girl trouble. Those girls caused nothing but trouble. Not as much trouble as this guy with the electro blasting bracelet things that vibrate and cause trouble. Because you don't want vibrations getting out of hand. Meanwhile, back in Asgard, Thor. So in case you've been living under a rock, the story is more or less the same, except not really. In this one, Don Blake, a doctor who had limps, has some sort of deformity or issue with one of his legs, goes on vacation to Norway. I mean, I wouldn't go this time of year because if you think it's dark in Seattle, but he goes there and he goes into a cave because there's aliens he sees, and he's like, oh, there's aliens, and he runs away trying to hide from the aliens, and he finds a stick and he kind of, like cracks it on the ground, and boom, he turns into Thor with the really kind of clunky inscription on the side of it, and then we get treated to this like few pages montage of he tests out his powers, and it's like, I'm going to spend a few pages learning how to be Thor, and then he just like kicks some alien ass and scares them away, and they're like, we're never coming back to invade this planet, they're too powerful. Whoa. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go back to America. Stan Lee was fun. It was fun. He pointed out at the end of this that there was a mistake in the very last panel. Can you find it? And it is that he spelled Thor, or whoever did the lettering, right? I don't know. Spelled Thor with 2 R's. So it was just like they're just trying to come up with stuff as quickly as possible. But this was the version of Thor, very different from the movie, at least in that he was a human who finds the stick, and because he's so awesome and he's such a great guy, this great surgeon, and has overcome his disability and stuff, he is worthy to be Thor. And so Thor is a secret identity guy, which in the Marvel Cinematic Universe he is not. We start to meet Sif and some of the other characters in the later issue here. The Mighty Thor, number 143. Dynamite. Fantastic. We're getting into some like really Pete Kirby kind of stuff. Crazy landscapes, and Kirby just had this thing about space that he couldn't just have like a black background. So just the entire galaxy is a huge nebula. I'm down with it. This is mainly about a master of the mystic arts. In this one he says, so, I had this idea for what if there was a magician character, but the magic was real, he could actually do magic. And so in one of these other sort of smaller comics that they would do short stories in was, he's like, how about Doctor Strange, Master of Black Magic? Steve Ditko tapped for this as well. And so Doctor Strange, why not? And then Stan Lee talks about in the introduction here, he's like, this is the first time we did a superhero like in action, or like sort of in media res, right? Does not start with his origin story. It just is like, okay, here's Doctor Strange fully realized, and he goes through this difficulty, and he's trying to protect the Ancient One from this evil enemy. There's like a lot of teasing of Mordo is a bad guy, as Nightmare is a bad guy, and so on. And then we see much later, or like several issues later, there is, in answer to an avalanche of requests, we present the origin of Doctor Strange. And this is, again, have you seen the movie? They pretty much cleaved right directly to it. He's a kind of this asshole doctor who's like, no, I'm too awesome to take any time. I don't really care. I'm just doing these surgeries, like just making the dough. And then he gets into this terrible car accident, and his hands are he has this nerve damage to his hands. He can't do surgery anymore. He hears about the Himalayan monastery where they have these miraculous cures. He goes there and finds that he has a sort of propensity for these magical powers, which he then learns at the feet of the Ancient One. And there we go again. One of my all of these are among my favorite superheroes of all time, starting with the Fantastic Four. This was inner child Phil just saying, hey man, I'm not going to have any H.R. Giger, J.G. Ballard inspired nightmares anymore. I'm going to live in the comfortable, happy, huckstery hands of Stan the Man Lee. Thank you for watching. I'm going to close it out when I can see my screen and I know where I am. That was Origins of Marvel Comics. 49 million out of 10. Oh my God, right? 24.5 million out of 5. No, it goes the other way around. We're done. And there you have it, true believers. That was number 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, and 38. You can't even see my hands. I was counting that off. It doesn't matter. 32 through 38 of the 100 book challenge. I am now officially caught up. These are all the books that I have finished so far. Talking to you the day after Christmas, if Christmas means anything to you, December 26th of 2025. This has been a great year of reading. I'm right now, as we sit, 2 books behind my 60 book Goodreads challenge. If I don't get 2 more books read in the next week or so, then c'est la vie. And I'm doing a good job, too, of trying, well, not quite, right? I mean, trying to stay away from the depressing stuff in the most depressing time of the year. And anyway, getting into a place where lots of work is here, got a lot of stuff in, projects scheduled all the way through into April. So I might not be really Johnny on the spot on the videos, but I will try to keep up with those. Try to get through this 100 book challenge. This is hard. Having this many more to go, right? What is this? 62 more books to go. Do I have 2 years of this still? I don't know. A year and a half, somewhere in there. Am I really going this long without buying books? But I said, remember, I did the video already where I questioned myself. I'm not going to question myself anymore. This will take you to the algorithmically chosen next video. This will take you to where you subscribe. And if you're not subscribed, that's your problem, is what that is. Caught up on the 100 book challenge. Enough said.